There's a particular kind of pain that doesn't announce itself with drama or noise. It lives quietly in the space between your thoughts, in the way you hold your breath when someone you love doesn't text back, in the panic that rises in your chest when you sense emotional distance. This pain has a name, though most people spend their entire lives never recognizing it. Carl Jung called it the abandonment wound, and it's likely been directing your choices, your relationships, and your sense of self-worth since before you could even speak. The abandonment wound isn't just about being left. It's about the deep, primal terror that you are fundamentally unlovable, that people will always leave, and that you must do whatever it takes to prevent that inevitable departure. This wound forms in childhood, often before explicit memory, when your developing brain interpreted absence, emotional unavailability, or inconsistency as evidence of your own unworthiness. Perhaps your mother was physically present but emotionally distant, lost in her own pain. Perhaps your father left or stayed but was never truly there. Perhaps you were the child who learned too early that your needs were too much, your emotions too big, your existence too burdensome. What makes this wound so insidious is that it doesn't heal with time. It doesn't fade because you grow older, achieve success, or find people who genuinely love you. Instead, it burrows deeper into your unconscious, creating what Jung called a complex, an autonomous pattern of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that operates independently of your conscious will. This complex doesn't care about logic or evidence. It doesn't listen when people tell you they love you. It interprets every slight delay, every moment of distraction, every instance of someone needing space as confirmation of what it has always known. You will be abandoned because there is something fundamentally wrong with you. The abandonment wound shapes your adult life in ways you likely don't recognize. It's there in the relationships you choose, almost always with people who are emotionally unavailable or inconsistent, because on some unconscious level, that familiarity feels like home. Your psyche, in its attempt to heal the original wound, continuously recreates the conditions that caused it, hoping this time the outcome will be different. This is what Jung meant by the repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to return to the scene of our original trauma, to try again and again to make it turn out differently. But without consciousness, without bringing this pattern into the light, you simply relive the same pain with different faces. You might recognize this wound in your hypervigilance, the way you scan every interaction for signs of withdrawal or rejection. You've become an expert at reading micro-expressions, at detecting the slightest shift in tone or energy. This isn't intuition, though you might call it that. This is survival. As a child, you learned that your safety depended on predicting when love would be withdrawn, so you could adjust yourself accordingly, make yourself smaller, more pleasing, less needy. You carried this exhausting vigilance into adulthood, where it masquerades as sensitivity or empathy, but is actually a trauma response that keeps you constantly on edge. The abandonment wound also reveals itself in your relationship with your own needs. You've likely learned to minimize them, to convince yourself you don't need much, that you're fine on your own. Independence became your armor, self-sufficiency your shield. But underneath this fierce autonomy lives a terrified child who learned that needing someone was dangerous, that vulnerability led to pain. So you push people away before they can leave you, or you cling so tightly they have no choice but to pull back, creating the very abandonment you feared. This is the cruel paradox of the wound. It compels you to behave in ways that ensure the abandonment you're trying desperately to avoid. Jung understood that our greatest wounds often become our greatest teachers, but only if we're willing to turn toward them with consciousness and compassion. The abandonment wound wants to be seen. It wants you to finally acknowledge the child within who was left to make sense of emotional absence alone, who concluded that she was the problem, that her needs were shameful, that love was conditional and could be revoked at any moment. That child is still inside you, still waiting, still organizing your present-day life around a past that no longer exists, except in the patterns you unconsciously repeat. What you must understand is that this wound doesn't define you, but it will control you until you bring it into consciousness. Every time you sabotage a healthy relationship, every time you settle for breadcrumbs of affection, Every time you abandon yourself to keep someone else from abandoning you, the wound is running the show. It speaks in the voice that tells you you're too much or not enough, that whispers you should be grateful for whatever scraps of love you receive, that insists you must earn the right to be loved through perfect behavior and constant self-monitoring. This voice feels like truth, but it's actually the voice of your unhealed past playing on repeat. The first step toward healing is recognition, not intellectual understanding, but deep, embodied recognition of how this wound operates in your life. This means getting honest about the patterns you keep recreating, the ways you abandon yourself, the relationships you choose that mirror your original wound. It means feeling, perhaps for the first time, the full weight of that childhood pain instead of continuing to run from it, through busyness, achievement, or the endless pursuit of external validation. Jung called this process making the unconscious conscious, and he insisted it was the only path to genuine transformation. You cannot heal what you cannot feel, and you cannot feel what you refuse to acknowledge. The abandonment wound has likely been protected by layers of defense mechanisms, sophisticated strategies your psyche developed to keep you from having to feel the unbearable pain of being emotionally left. These defenses served you once. They kept you functioning when you were too young to process what was happening. But now they're keeping you trapped, preventing the very intimacy and connection you long for, because to open yourself to real love would mean risking the original pain all over again. Bringing consciousness to the abandonment wound means recognizing it not as a character flaw but as an adaptation, a creative solution your young psyche developed in response to an impossible situation. You were a child who needed consistent, attuned love and didn't receive it, so you created strategies to cope. You became hypervigilant, you learned to please, you made yourself small, you decided you didn't need anyone. You became perfect, you became invisible. These strategies worked then. They kept you psychologically safe when you had no other options. But they're costing you your life now, keeping you locked in patterns that prevent genuine connection and authentic self-expression. The journey toward healing requires that you develop a relationship with the part of yourself that carries this wound. Not to fix her or make her go away, but to finally give her what she needed then and never received, witnessing validation, compassion, and the truth that the abandonment was never her fault. This inner child doesn't need you to be strong or independent or fine on your own. She needs you to acknowledge her terror, to hold her pain, to tell her that her needs were legitimate and that the failure belonged to the adults who couldn't meet them, not to her. The abandonment wound expresses itself differently in each person, but there are recognizable patterns that Jung would have identified as manifestations of the same core complex. Some people respond to this wound by becoming what we might call the pleaser, the one who contorts herself into whatever shape she believes will keep people from leaving. If you recognize yourself here, you've likely spent your life trying to be perfect, to anticipate and meet others' needs before they even express them, to make yourself indispensable through service and selflessness. You've learned to read rooms with uncanny accuracy, to adjust your personality depending on who you're with, to suppress your own opinions and desires in favor of whatever will maintain harmony and connection. This adaptation feels like kindness, like generosity, like love. But underneath it lies a desperate bargain. If I can just be good enough, helpful enough, understanding enough, they won't leave. The tragedy is that this strategy prevents real intimacy because the person others are connecting with isn't actually you. It's a carefully constructed version designed to be maximally lovable and minimally burdensome. You disappear yourself to keep from being left, never realizing that this self-abandonment is a form of leaving yourself that far predates anyone else's departure. The wound is so afraid of external abandonment that it engineers an internal one, and you lose yourself long before anyone else has the chance to leave. Other people respond to the abandonment wound through what appears to be its opposite, radical independence and emotional withdrawal. If this is your pattern, you've likely convinced yourself that you don't need anyone, that relationships are optional luxuries rather than fundamental human needs. You pride yourself on your self-sufficiency, your ability to handle everything alone, your freedom from the messy complications of emotional dependence. You might even look down on people who seem needy or clingy, not recognizing that your fierce independence is just the other side of the same wound, another strategy to avoid the pain of being left. This defense works by abandoning others before they can abandon you, by maintaining such tight control over your vulnerability that no one can ever get close enough to hurt you. You might sabotage relationships just as they begin to deepen, suddenly finding fatal flaws in partners who were perfect just days before. Or you might choose people who are unavailable, married, emotionally distant, or otherwise incapable of real commitment, because on some unconscious level, you know these relationships won't ask you to risk genuine vulnerability. The wound protects itself by ensuring you never have to feel the abandonment it fears most, but the cost is that you never get to experience real intimacy either. Many people oscillate between these two extremes, sometimes within the same relationship. You cling desperately when you sense distance, then pull away harshly when someone gets too close. This pattern, often called anxious avoidant or fearful avoidant attachment, leaves both you and your partners confused and exhausted. You want closeness but fear it, desire independence but panic when you have it. Your nervous system is constantly dysregulated, unable to find the middle ground where genuine connection lives, because that middle ground wasn't modeled for you in childhood. You never learned that it's possible to be both close and safe, both vulnerable and protected, both needy and valued. The abandonment wound also manifests in your relationship with yourself, particularly in the voice of your inner critic. This voice, which Jung might have identified as a negative parental complex, constantly evaluates and finds you lacking. It tells you you're too sensitive, too demanding, too emotional. It compares you unfavorably to others who seem to navigate relationships with ease. It insists that if you would just be different, better, less, more, then maybe you'd be worthy of consistent love. This voice feels like it's trying to help you improve, but it's actually perpetuating the wound by reinforcing the core belief that you are the problem, that there is something fundamentally wrong with you that needs fixing before you can be loved. What you must understand is that this inner critic developed as protection. If you could just figure out what was wrong with you and fix it, maybe your parent would become emotionally available. Maybe they would stop leaving or raging or disappearing into their own pain. The child's mind can't comprehend that adults are complex beings with their own wounds and limitations. It's psychologically safer for a child to believe she's the problem, because at least then she has some control, some possibility of changing the outcome. But this protective mechanism becomes a prison in adulthood, where you continue to attack yourself for having normal human needs and emotions, where you internalize the abandonment by abandoning yourself over and over again. The abandonment wound shapes not just your intimate relationships, but your entire approach to life. It influences your career choices, often driving you to overachieve in an attempt to prove your worth, or conversely causing you to underachieve because success would make you visible and visibility feels dangerous. It affects your friendships, making it difficult to trust or believe that people genuinely enjoy your company rather than merely tolerating you. It colors your relationship with your body, particularly if you learned that your physical presence or needs were burdensome. It impacts your spirituality, making it hard to trust in anything larger than yourself, or to believe you're worthy of grace, love, or belonging that doesn't have to be earned. Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject and repress because they're too painful or shameful to acknowledge. For those with abandonment wounds, the shadow often contains your genuine needs, your anger at those who failed to meet them, your grief over what you didn't receive, and your terror that you are fundamentally unlovable. These feelings are so threatening that you've likely spent enormous energy keeping them buried, presenting instead a false self that is fine, capable, independent, and unaffected. But the shadow doesn't disappear when we ignore it. Instead, it leaks out in passive aggression, in sudden emotional outbursts that seem disproportionate, in psychosomatic symptoms, in the ways you unconsciously punish people for getting close or for pulling away. Integrating this shadow, bringing these rejected parts of yourself back into consciousness, is essential for healing. This means allowing yourself to feel the anger you've been suppressing, the rage at being left to figure out love on your own without adequate modeling or support. It means grieving what you didn't receive, not glossing over your childhood with statements like everyone did their best, or I had it better than some people. Maybe that's true, but your pain is still valid, your loss still real. The child within you doesn't need perspective or silver linings. She needs acknowledgement that what happened wasn't okay, that she deserved better, that the failure belonged to the adults, not to her. This process of integration also means reclaiming your needs as legitimate rather than shameful. You've likely been taught, implicitly or explicitly, that needing someone is weakness, that dependency is pathological, that healthy people are self-sufficient. But this is a lie that our culture tells to rationalize emotional neglect. Humans are fundamentally relational beings. We're wired for connection, for interdependence, for mutual care. Your needs for consistency, attunement, presence, and responsiveness are not flaws to be overcome, but essential requirements for psychological well-being. The problem was never that you needed too much. The problem was that those needs weren't adequately met, and you concluded that the need itself was the issue, rather than the failure of those around you to respond to it. Healing the abandonment wound requires more than intellectual understanding. You can read every psychology book, understand attachment theory perfectly, and still find yourself acting out the same patterns because this wound lives in your body and your unconscious, not in your thinking mind. Jung emphasized that transformation happens through experience, not through knowledge alone. You must feel your way through this healing, not think your way through it. This means developing a practice of turning toward your feelings rather than away from them, of getting curious about your patterns rather than judging them, of bringing compassionate awareness to the moments when the wound is activated. Start by noticing when you're triggered into abandonment panic. This might feel like sudden anxiety when someone doesn't respond to your message quickly, a wave of despair when a partner needs space, rage when someone disappoints you, or the urge to bolt from a relationship that's getting serious. Instead of immediately acting on these feelings or trying to make them go away, pause, take a breath. Ask yourself, how old do I feel right now? Often when the abandonment wound is activated, you'll realize you feel very young, childlike, as if your survival is threatened. This is because your nervous system is responding to the present situation as if it's the past, as if you're still that powerless child who genuinely did depend on unreliable caregivers for survival. When you recognize this activation, speak to the child within. Tell her, I know you're scared. I know this feeling reminds you of when you were little and didn't understand why they couldn't be there for you. But we're not in danger now. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. You're not alone anymore. This might feel awkward or artificial at first, but this practice of self-parenting is essential for healing. That inner child never had someone soothe her terror, validate her experience, or help her regulate overwhelming emotions. She's been waiting all this time for rescue, not understanding that you, your adult self, are the only one who can provide what she needs. Another crucial practice is learning to separate past from present. When you're in a relationship, particularly an intimate one, you're never just with that person. You're also with everyone who hurt you before, every person who left or failed to show up, every disappointment and betrayal your system remembers. Your partner says they need alone time, and your abandonment wound hears, I don't want you, you're too much, I'm leaving. But what if they actually just need alone time? What if their need for space has nothing to do with your worthiness and everything to do with their own nervous system, their own needs, their own way of processing the world? Learning to reality test your fears is part of healing. When you feel that familiar panic rising, ask yourself, is there evidence that this person is actually leaving? Or is my wound interpreting a normal human need through the lens of past abandonment? Have they actually been inconsistent? Or am I expecting perfect attunement that no human can provide? Am I responding to what's happening now or to what happened then? This doesn't mean your feelings aren't valid, but it creates space between the trigger and your response, allowing you to choose how to act rather than being hijacked by unconscious patterns. You'll also need to practice staying present with discomfort rather than immediately trying to resolve it or make it go away. The abandonment wound creates urgency, a sense that you must fix the relationship, get reassurance, or understand what's wrong right now. But this urgency is often the wound itself, the child's panic that if she doesn't do something immediately, the abandonment will be permanent. Learning to tolerate this discomfort without acting on it is incredibly difficult, but absolutely necessary. It teaches your nervous system that you can survive uncertainty, that space doesn't equal abandonment, that you don't have to control everything to be safe. Part of this practice involves choosing different partners and friendships than you have in the past. If you've been drawn to emotionally unavailable people, to relationships that mirror your original wound, you'll need to consciously choose differently, even when it feels wrong or boring. Secure people, those who are consistent, available, and straightforward in their care, often don't activate the wound in the same way, so they might not feel like love to you initially. Your system is calibrated to recognize love as something you have to earn, chase, or suffer for. Someone who simply shows up reliably, who doesn't play games, who demonstrates care through actions might feel too easy, too simple, not intense enough. But intensity isn't intimacy, and the familiar isn't the same as the healthy. You'll need to practice staying in relationships that feel stable, even when your wound insists this can't be real love, because it doesn't hurt enough. You'll need to resist the urge to create drama or test people's commitment by pushing them away. You'll need to practice receiving care without immediately distrusting it or finding ways to disqualify it. This recalibration takes time, patience, and a willingness to feel uncomfortable as you learn a new way of being in relationship. Healing also requires that you examine the ways you abandon yourself. Do you ignore your needs until you're depleted? Do you say yes when you mean no? Do you stay in relationships or situations that are slowly killing your spirit because leaving feels impossible? Do you silence your voice, suppress your desires, or minimize your pain because you learned that your inner world is too much, too complicated, too burdensome for others to handle? Every time you abandon yourself, you reinforce the wound's core message: you are not worth showing up for. Learning to stay with yourself, to honor your needs and feelings as valid even when others are uncomfortable with them, is perhaps the most radical act of healing. This means setting boundaries, even when people react badly. It means leaving relationships that require you to be less than you are. It means pursuing your desires even when others don't understand them. It means taking up space, expressing opinions, making noise, being visible even though visibility feels terrifying. The wound heals not by making yourself smaller and more acceptable, but by finally allowing yourself to be full-sized, full-voiced, fully human. Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are rather than who you were conditioned to be. For those with abandonment wounds, individuation requires separating your identity from the wound. You are not your fear of abandonment. You are not your hypervigilance, your people-pleasing, your avoidance, or your desperate clinging. These are strategies you developed, patterns you learned, defenses you built. Underneath them is the person you were before the wound, and the person you can become as you heal. Someone capable of genuine intimacy, able to both give and receive love, worthy of care simply by virtue of existing. This process isn't linear. You won't heal the abandonment wound once and be done. It will resurface, particularly in moments of stress, transition, or increased intimacy. But each time it appears, you'll have more tools, more awareness, more capacity to meet it with compassion rather than shame. You'll recognize it faster, respond to it more skillfully, recover more quickly. The wound may always be part of your story, but it doesn't have to write your future. There comes a moment in every healing journey when you must decide who you want to be moving forward. You've lived your whole life with the abandonment wound directing your choices, shaping your relationships, limiting your possibilities. You've accommodated it, defended against it, run from it, and acted it out in countless ways. But now, you have a choice that wasn't available to you as a child. You can choose to heal, not to erase the past or pretend it didn't happen, but to transform your relationship with it so that it no longer controls your present and future. This choice requires courage because healing means feeling. It means finally allowing yourself to experience the grief, rage, terror, and loneliness that you've been running from for decades. Your defenses developed to protect you from these overwhelming emotions, to make them manageable when you were too young to process them. But now, as an adult with resources and support that child you didn't have, you can turn toward these feelings and survive them. In fact, you can do more than survive them. You can integrate them, learn from them, and emerge more whole on the other side. The grief is perhaps the most important feeling to allow. You need to grieve what you didn't receive, the childhood you deserved but didn't get, the secure attachment that should have been your birthright. You need to grieve for the child who learned too early that love was conditional, who took on responsibility for adult failures, who made herself small to avoid being too much. This grief isn't self-pity or victimhood. It's acknowledgement of real loss, validation of legitimate pain. Until you grieve what you didn't have, you'll keep unconsciously trying to get it from people who can't provide it, setting yourself up for repeated disappointment and reinforcing the wound. Alongside grief comes anger, and this might be even more difficult to access if you've spent your life being nice, understanding, or forgiving. But you have a right to your anger. You were a child who needed consistency, attunement, and safety, and those needs weren't adequately met. That's not okay, even if the adults in your life were doing their best, even if they had their own wounds, even if things could have been worse. Your anger doesn't negate their humanity, but denying it negates yours. Let yourself feel furious that you had to become hypervigilant, that you learned to fear your own needs, that you've wasted years of your life trying to earn what should have been freely given. This anger, when consciously held and expressed appropriately, becomes fuel for change. It gives you the energy to set boundaries, to leave situations that don't serve you, to stop settling for breadcrumbs when you deserve the whole meal. The abandonment wound wants you compliant, grateful for whatever scraps of affection come your way. Reclaiming your anger reclaims your power, your ability to say no, your right to demand better treatment from others and from yourself. As you do this deeper work of feeling and integration, you might find it helpful to have support. This could mean therapy, particularly with someone trained in attachment, trauma, or depth psychology, who can help you navigate the unconscious patterns and provide the attuned presence you missed in childhood. It might mean finding communities of others doing similar healing work, people who understand this wound and won't judge your process. It could involve somatic practices like yoga, dance, or body-centered therapy that help release trauma stored in your physical body, not just your mind. You might also find that engaging more deeply with your inner world through journaling, dream work, or active imagination, practices Jung championed, helps bring unconscious material to consciousness. Your dreams, in particular, often reveal how the abandonment wound is operating and what your psyche needs for healing. Pay attention to recurring themes of being left, of searching for someone who's disappeared, of feeling invisible or forgotten. These dreams aren't random. They're your unconscious communicating about the work that needs to be done. For some people, the healing journey eventually leads to a reckoning with the actual people who inflicted the original wound. This doesn't mean you need to confront your parents or have a dramatic conversation about everything they did wrong, but it might mean developing a more realistic view of them, seeing them as flawed humans with their own wounds and limitations, rather than as the all-powerful figures they seemed when you were small. This process, which Jung called withdrawing projections, allows you to stop waiting for them to become who you needed them to be, and to finally accept what they actually were and are. Some people find that this leads to forgiveness, not because the abandonment was acceptable, but because carrying resentment hurts them more than it hurts anyone else. But forgiveness isn't required for healing, and it's certainly not the first step. You need to feel your feelings, acknowledge the harm, and validate your pain long before forgiveness becomes possible or even desirable. And forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. You can release resentment for your own well-being while still maintaining boundaries or even distance from people who continue to be harmful or unavailable. What matters most is that you stop waiting for external salvation. The child within believes that if she could just find the right person, the perfect love who never leaves and always shows up, the wound would finally heal. But this is a fantasy that keeps you trapped. No one, no matter how loving or consistent, can heal your abandonment wound for you. They can provide a secure relationship that supports your healing, but the actual work of integration, of transforming your internal patterns, of learning to stay with yourself. That's work only you can do. This is actually good news, though it might not feel like it initially. It means your healing isn't dependent on finding someone perfect or on other people changing. It means you have agency, choice, power over your own psychological development. You're not that helpless child anymore, waiting for adults to notice your pain and respond to it. You're the adult now, and you can give yourself what you needed then: witness, validation, compassion, and the unwavering commitment to not abandon yourself even when things get difficult. As you continue this work, something shifts. The wound doesn't disappear, but it loosens its grip. You find yourself able to tolerate more uncertainty in relationships without panicking. You start choosing people who are actually available, rather than unconsciously recreating the original abandonment. You notice when you're people-pleasing or self-abandoning and can course-correct more quickly. You feel more solid in yourself, less dependent on external validation to know you're okay. Intimacy becomes less terrifying because you trust your ability to handle disappointment, to speak up for your needs, to survive even if someone leaves. This transformation doesn't happen because you've become perfect or because you've erased your past. It happens because you've developed a different relationship with your wound, with yourself, with the entire question of love and belonging. You've stopped seeing your needs as shameful and started recognizing them as human. You've stopped believing that abandonment means you're unworthy and started understanding it as someone else's limitation, not your deficit. You've stopped waiting to be rescued and started learning to be your own secure base. If you felt something shift as you've been reading this, if you've recognized yourself in these patterns and felt both the pain of that recognition and the first stirrings of hope that something different is possible, then you're ready for the next step in your journey. Healing the abandonment wound isn't something you can do just by understanding it intellectually. It requires sustained attention, practical tools, and guided practices that help you rewire these deep patterns. I've created something specifically for women who are ready to do this work, a resource that takes everything we've explored here and gives you a clear path forward with exercises, reflections, and practices designed to help you finally transform your relationship with abandonment. You'll find it waiting for you in the description, ready whenever you're ready to take that next step toward the freedom and connection you deserve.